right, miss?
Megara. My friends call me Meg. At least they would if I had any friends. So, did they give you a name along with all those rippling pectorals? Are you always this articulate?
Hercules. My name is Hercules.
Cinderella story.
You want answers?
We're on a mission from God.
Inconceivable! Take your stinking paws off me!
I'm afraid I can't do that.
Have fun storming the castle!
Hey everybody, welcome to the Story Cauldron, finding the folktales, fables, and philosophies behind your favorite Hollywood films. I'm Bobby, the movie dude.
I'm Anthony, the philosophy guy.
I'm Garrett, and I'm here.
And here on the Story Cauldron, we take about an hour to explore the stories behind the cinematic stories you love. Really, it's all Tolkien's fault. His description of the cauldron of story, out of which bubbles all the tales that our cultures tell, helps us to see that every story depends on the stories that came before it.
And today our hero works out his daddy issues by punching things.
It's definitely an accurate oversimplification.
But it's still Hercules from 1997.
Hercules.
Such a good one.
So let's start with the movie itself. Garrett?
Alrighty, so a failed murder plot leaves the baby Greek god Hercules depowered on Earth to be raised as a human. Only one element of his divine heritage remains: his unbelievable super strength. Learning of his true parentage as a young man, Hercules and his friend Pegasus, a winged horse, seeks the help of Phil, the trainer of heroes, so that he can prove himself worthy to rejoin the gods on Mount Olympus. Along the way, he falls in love with the sarcastic Megara, defeats a zoo full of monsters, and manages to prevent the evil Hades from taking over the world.
All right, so I'm going to ask it this time. When was the first time that you saw this?
Yeah, I was trying to think about it. I don't really remember when I saw it. I remember Hercules for being the first Disney movie that I thought that I was almost like too old. I was too cool to see it. I mean, I still ended up seeing it, but I wasn't enamored by the Disney magic in 1997. I guess I was starting to grow up a little bit.
We were like, what, 9?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's when you're cool.
That's when you're like, I don't like baby stuff anymore.
Well, yeah, and then you go through this period when you're a kid where everything's awesome, and then nothing is awesome for a while because you're too cool for anything to be awesome. And then you kind of get over yourself at some point. I don't know.
And you realize how awesome it really is.
And you realize how awesome everything is again. Yeah,
that's true.
Well, now you get some of the jokes.
Well, yeah, that's true. There's Hercules is so good for that too.
It really is. When was the first time you saw it, Bob?
Same for me. Like it was a while back. You know, like.
Well, I'm
when
glad
you
we're
were
all in the same boat.
Yeah. So, Garrett.
Yeah, I don't even remember either.
Yeah.
It's been too long.
Yeah, it's a movie that, I mean, it's been 20 years. This is the 20th anniversary.
The 20th anniversary was in June, but
a few months ago.
Semantics.
But this is...
I'm very particular about my anniversaries, thank you.
This movie comes right at the end of what some have called the Disney Renaissance period. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. These eras?
Yeah, there's so many.
Considering we talked about the dark ages of Disney in our first episode.
Oh,
and if you haven't listened to it, you should totally go listen to it. The Black Cauldron.
Yeah. Quick plug.
Yeah. So the Renaissance period, it runs from like the late 80s through the 90s. And that's where you get a lot of the movies that I know that I grew up loving with Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and The Lion King. And I like a lot of the stuff that has just turned Disney into a powerhouse in more recent years. A lot of adaptations of them have come out. And Hercules is not the absolute last one in that series, but it's one of the last ones.
Yeah, it's pretty close to the end.
So it made a decent amount of money. I mean, in its day, it kind of underperformed what people were hoping.
At least it made money.
But it made, we're still talking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars.
I was about to say hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is low.
That would be pretty bad.
We only put a budget of like $5 million. We got 100,000 back. It's no big deal.
Well, and they did actually make, when it was first released, they did kind of a test run in just one theater, and it did make $200,000 in the first weekend at just one theater. They opened it up to a second theater in the second weekend, and it cracked 1.5 million out of just those two theaters in 2 weeks. So it looked like it was going to go on to do quite well, and it did. I mean, it did okay.
Yeah.
Critically though, it still is rather highly acclaimed.
Yeah, 83% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
God bless.
Nominated for a couple of Oscars for everyone's favorite. Well, I don't know. Is that your favorite song from it?
It's not my favorite song, but it is a very good song.
It is a good song. Go the Distance, one of the great Disney ballads. Yeah, nominated for an Oscar and for a Golden Globe. It didn't win either one, thanks to Celine Dion. But
Dang it, Celine.
James Cameron,
Titanic.
Yeah.
Speaking of another 20th anniversary.
Oh, yeah. Well, of the movie.
Yeah. So.
But let's talk about one of the things that I am most excited about. This is another movie that has a Wilhelm scream in it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, when does it come in this movie?
And this one, it's pretty sure it's what was it? Cyclops knocked down a tower and
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Okay,
it was one of those monsters, one of the big monsters.
Yeah.
The Titans.
Yeah, and someone screams as they run out of the way.
I watched it today, but I
it.
wasn't like super glued to Netflix.
Super glued.
Hey,
I think that the Wilhelm scream is one of those things that you almost. Like it cuts through so many other things. So even if I'm not really paying attention, there's another one.
Another one.
I love it. I originally, when I went to study video and audio and all that stuff, I wanted to do some sound design, and I put that sound effect in every single project that I had.
I bet your professors just loved you.
Oh, no. They would laugh, and then they're like 20 projects down the road. Okay, Bobby, stop. Please.
The joke is good for a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's nice every once in a while, but not every day. So, like, hey, hardly working? Yeah, that type of thing. No. Okay, enough.
I do.
Enough, you're done, you're cut off.
I remember too. I had this when I was a kid. I took piano lessons, and I had this book of Disney songs, and "Go the Distance" was in that book, and I was always that was the one I always skipped through. I still have the book, and if you open it, it kind of naturally folds open to the Hercules page because I always played that song. I thought it was just the coolest.
See, when I was in my cello lessons, it was always 0 to Hero.
Is that
they didn't have
your
Go
favorite
the Distance.
song?
No, my favorite song is I Won't Say I'm in Love.
That's the correct answer. Very good.
Because, Susan Egan.
It's so, that is such a great song. And I think, we need to get into it, but she's one of my favorite characters from this.
Same.
Megara.
But we'll get there.
We will.
Yeah, we should really start with the namesake of the movie, right? I mean, if we're going to talk about where this movie came from, obviously the movie Hercules has to come from Hercules first.
You almost said Heracles.
I did, because that's his name, but it's not. But
it's his name, but it's not. But it is.
If you're going to set the movie in Greece, which they did, you should use the Greek name,
not the Roman
name. But his name is Heracles in the Greek, but then a lot of Greek mythology gets taken over by Rome, and they change a lot of the names around, and so Hercules is his Latinized form, or the Romanized form. So I'm sure there was a reason for it. I couldn't find a good explanation.
I think Hercules is just easier than Heracles.
So, it was probably that marathon runner that they had the same guide transfer the story to Rome. And he's like, right before he died, he didn't have a chance to correct himself.
You
and
mean
say,
the actual runner from Marathon?
Heracles, not Hercules. Boom. Yeah.
So Hercules. I mean, we can stick with that, right? Or Heracles. A lot of the actual. I mean, as far as the story points in the various myths about him, those really don't change very much from Greece to
No,
Rome.
the stories are
And
pretty
don't
much
we
the
have
same.
Euripides to thank for that?
You tell me.
I
I mean, we have
The Segway machine.
we have references to Hercules in a bunch of different ancient writers. He gets mentioned. He's one of the big character, almost as big as one of the gods in terms of how often he gets referenced by different writers, even though he's not technically a god. That's one thing the movie changed.
Yeah.
He becomes a god.
Yeah.
Or, well, he was born a god, and then he loses it, then becomes a god.
Yeah,
And then loses again.
That's a change that makes
Spoilers!
sense. I completely understand why Disney did not want to have a children's movie predicated on infidelity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today when I was watching. I was like, oh, I can see why they changed it.
Yeah, because if anybody out there knows anything about Greek mythology, you know that at least half of the stories start with Zeus going out and sleeping with somebody who isn't his wife. And
Sorry, Hera.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's where Hercules' story begins, is with Zeus going out and sleeping with how do you say her name?
Yeah, I was
think
going to
it's
ask you.
Alcmene. Excuse me, Alcmene.
Alcmene.
That's what my guess would be.
Which, I mean, I don't know if her name ever gets said. His name gets said. But in Disney's movie, they kept the same names for the parents. Amphitryon and Alcmene. Sure, we'll go with that. But in the actual myth, like, Alcmene is actually his mom. And so he's a demigod. He's half god, half man. But in this movie, they didn't want to have to force parents into the awkward conversation with their children explaining what it means to cheat on your spouse.
Yeah. Well,
I get it.
I'm glad that they did it, because now it's fun for all ages.
Yeah.
Well, when I was little, I totally would have been one of those kids that would walk up to their mom. What does it mean to cheat on your wife?
Yeah, totally, right? I mean, of course, that's what kids are going to do. But with that little change, it sent out quite a few ripples in the storyline that had to be changed as well.
Yeah. Well, the whole Hercules origin story is basically Hera getting back at Zeus through Hercules, just punishing Hercules. And so that's actually the first big difference that we see within the movie and the actual mythology, is that Hades is not the bad guy. It's Hera that's the antagonist of the stories.
Moral of the story, don't cheat on your wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but if you're going to have Hera be his actual mom in the movie, then there's really no reason for her to be a bad character. And she's not even really a character at all, except in that first scene.
She shows up.
She
says,
there.
the baby.
And that's about it, right? So, you have to have a villain from somewhere, and so they come up with Hades as the villain.
And they have James Wood play Hades, which I thought
10
was
out of
the
10.
best decision that they could have made.
Yeah, honestly, that's got to be one of the most iconic Disney villains,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Oh, true.
2 thumbs way, way up. I had to.
My favorite is is my hair out? Is my hair out?
And I guess he did a lot of ad-libbing with that. Like a lot of
I
those
can
little
believe it.
mannerisms, those little jokes, that was Woods.
I dig it. Oh, he's awesome.
Apparently, I read this somewhere, but they had approached Jack Nicholson to be that role first. And Nicholson was into it, but he wanted way too much money. Like they just
An exorbitant amount.
And so they couldn't do it. And then one thing led to another, and it ended up being Woods. And I am so glad that they went that route, because I mean, Nicholson would have been interesting, but it would have been a very different. It wouldn't have been nearly as funny, for one thing.
Yeah.
True.
And he does a good job of being this kind of sinister villain who's also, I mean, he's like a used car salesman.
Yeah.
He's like the ultimate used car salesman.
But anyway, back to the story. In the Greek myth, doesn't Hera send servants and serpents to kill Hercules, just kind of like Hades sends Pain and Panic, his 2 little minions?
Yeah. And in fact, she sends servants, and they're misdirected by Hercules' real mom. Alcmene. Is that right? Am I saying this right?
We'll go with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, Alcmene's like, no, he's in there, and then they send him to the wrong room, and then the serpents she sends them down to try to kill Hercules. Hercules strangles them and kills them. And another story that I hadn't heard since starting Greek myth until today and doing this research, we have this other story about Alcmene taking Hercules into the woods to hide him from Hera, and Athena finding Hercules and taking him to Hera, saying, "Oh no, he's just an abandoned infant." And so Hera nurses Hercules, and imbibing some of her power to him. So that's another, it reinforces his strength. So he's stronger than a normal demigod.
And then she's like, "Oh no, I've been tricked."
No, actually, she's like, "Ow, I've been bit." Throws Hercules. And long story short, we have the Milky Way.
Wait,
Oh my god, I
hold
had no
on.
idea that's where that was going to go.
Yeah.
What does that say about Hera, though? That first of all, she's willing to nurse some random kid that her friend brings to her, and then second, that she literally punts him across the room when she gets mad at the guy. This would have been... Never mind James Woods. I want to see that girl in a Disney movie.
Yeah, that would be pretty interesting to watch.
Oh my gosh.
But so you guys hadn't heard that either?
No, I hadn't heard.
Okay.
That's fantastic, though.
So yeah, that's...
Next time you look up at the night sky, just think Hercules. Thank you.
Or Heracles, which means
Heracles.
glory of Hera, right?
Yeah, they named him that to try and appease her because they knew that she wasn't going to be happy about him being that Heracles was a thing. So they said, well, maybe if we name him in honor of her, she won't be quite so mad. And it totally didn't work, but it's a nice thought.
Well, dang. Okay. Well, and then the other big story about Heracles is his 12 labors, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know all of them or really any of them very well.
Well, some of them show up in the movie in that big montage, the hero montage.
The Zero to Hero song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like that.
Although the whole idea of the movie, it gives an entirely different reason for why he's performing all of these feats. In the movie, he wants to rejoin his family on Mount Olympus, right? And so he has to prove his worth. He has to prove that he deserves to be a god.
He has to prove that he is a hero.
In the actual Greek myths, he's not proving that he's a hero. He's atoning for this great sin that he has committed because he gets married. He actually marries Megara. That is actually the name of his first wife. And they have some children, and they're living this happy life until Hera comes and screws it all up because does she just snap her fingers or something?
Yeah, she causes him to go crazy and mad and
in this berserker rage, he kills everything around him. He basically kills his family because Hera makes him lose his mind.
Yep.
And in order to atone for that, I mean, it's a tragic story, right? It's really sad that he kills his family. And there's something. Am I right in thinking that he doesn't remember it all? There's something about that where he's
something like that, and he ends up coming out of this rage, and after he passes out and wakes up and can't stop crying because he's done something wrong, and it just breaks him to find out that he was responsible for his family's death. So he goes out to find a way to atone.
We should probably make a note about the Incredible Hulk or something here.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds a lot like... there's plenty of berserker rage sorts of stories, but especially given the fact that we're later on going to talk about superheroes, it's at least probably worth mentioning. Yeah, a little Bruce
Hulk.
Banner action, going super strong, losing his mind,
You won't
destroying
like
things.
me when I'm angry.
Aw,
Or-
you beat me to it.
when I'm in a gigantic Hera-induced rage.
Yeah. Just turn green.
Oh, now there's some art. I'd like to see. But yeah, anyway, so he's working off his sins. He has 12. Well, first it's 10. First it's 10 labors that he has to perform, but then through some kind of unfair trickery, he ends up having to do 12. and they're all like defeat this really impressive monster, or my favorite one is cleaning out the stables.
Oh yeah, in one day.
In one day.
Has to be one day.
There's this king who has all of these really amazing horses, and they're just beautiful, and they're world renowned for being fast and gorgeous.
And they poop everywhere.
For some reason, nobody has cleaned up the stables in
years. Yeah.
And so it's just this massive mountain of disgusting mess that he has to clean in one day in order for the labor to count. And so he diverts a river. He goes and punches something.
It's like 2 rivers, isn't it?
And maybe he joins 2 rivers together so that they flow, and they flow through the stables, and they wash all the poop away. And again, Disney dropping the ball. Why
that would have been amazing
not
scene.
Including that in the, you could have. I mean, you could have
put
had
that in the montage.
Exactly.
For sure.
You could have had Pegasus like surfing down the river. He totally would have gotten away with that. But.
Yeah, and he was actually promised like a 10th of the herd if he could do it, and then they're like, "No, just kidding. You did it, but we're not going to give you the 10th of the herd because if we were to pay you for it, it wouldn't count as a labor to atone your sin."
That happens a lot. There's quite a few of those labors. And again, that's why he ends up doing 12 instead of 10, because somebody says, "Well, yeah, actually, those 2 don't count." So it's and he has much more of a tragic kind of character arc in these myths.
Well, let's start off with Hercules' first labor, because that's a pretty important one, and that's when he's sent to kill the Nemean lion, who is impervious to all weapons. And so he ends up like going out to this lion, which isn't there a little bit of it in the movie?
I think in that montage, there's one point where he punches several monsters, and they kind of stack up, and I think one of them's a big lion. Yeah,
well, anyway, he strangles it with his bare hands and then wears its skin for like the rest of his life. So,
which is pretty clever. I guess he does do that too when he's getting his picture painted on an urn. He's wearing a lion skin over that, which
that looks an awful lot like Scar.
I think that's actually one of the things I remember about watching this movie the first time as a kid, because I noticed that and I just thought that was amazing. That was just the coolest thing, that this little hint at it's not a connected universe, but it's like this little nod to a connected universe.
Yeah.
And man,
Anthony's first foray into Easter eggs.
Little baby Anthony loving the Easter eggs. Yeah,
I love it. Get on Reddit. There's so much. You learn everything.
Whether you want to learn it or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Nemean lion, a lot of the pictures you see of Hercules, he's wearing this big lion skin cloak.
Yeah.
So that's an important first part.
And okay, so we move on to labor number 2, which is a pretty important one: to kill the monster known as the Hydra, who had 9 venomous heads, and when one was cut off, 2 more would grow in its place.
Hey, that sounds kind of familiar to the Disney movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty big part in the Disney movie, because you got the 2 little kids. Mister.
Call IXII.
Yeah. And it's pain and panic in disguise, luring him into...
I totally wrote down someone call IXII, by the way, just because I really wanted to bring it in this podcast.
Well, it's
so good.
Funny.
Roman numeral humor.
Yeah, in the movie, though, the whole idea that the heads grow back, that's this big surprise. You see the monster, and he just looks like this giant... It's weird. He looks like a dinosaur or something at first when he just has one head. Or like a really...
He looks really
giraffe.
Bottom heavy.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. But he looks
I'm sure they planned it that way. It's like, oh, we're going to have to keep these head balanced.
He looks like silly putty that's been stretched out too far.
Yeah.
But it's a much easier time. Disney Hercules has a much easier time fighting the Hydra than Greek Hercules.
Oh, yeah.
He has a crowd of witnesses, which wouldn't work in ancient Greece, because the Hydra would breathe out this venomous cloud of poisonous gas that you could... Venomous cloud of poisonous gas. That's a little backwards. Poisonous cloud. of poisonous gas.
Okay, I was about to say, that's
Because
a
he's
little
not biting
redundant.
you.
Yeah.
Anyway, he would breathe out this gas that if you would breathe it, you would die. And so the whole time that Hercules is in the fight, he has to hold his breath, or else he'll immediately lose. So the whole idea that the town is there watching him, like in a stadium, is it's good for Disney, but
Yeah.
not
And this is one of those labors that wasn't counted as one of the 10 because he had help. Apparently his nephew came out and was like, "Hey, I'm going to go sear the necks of this monster with a torch to prevent them from growing back." So anyway, he didn't defeat him by himself independently, so it wasn't able to be counted in the original 10 labors. So hence number 11 came along.
And it ended up being crucial for him, though, because the Hydra has this poisonous blood.
Yes.
So he ends up taking his arrows and dipping the tips of the arrows in the blood, so that from then on out he has the most deadly arrows you can find because they're covered in Hydra blood, and so it actually enables him to fulfill a few of the other labors because he's able to kill some of these things that can't be killed by normal weapons.
Interesting.
And is everybody just going to ignore the, Hail Hydra
Yeah.
elephant in the room?
Well, we got it. Yeah, we got to talk about that. That's
we have to talk about Hydra and Captain America and all that in a little bit.
yeah. The Hydra is this symbol for things that are hard to kill, right? And
Yeah.
in Marvel Comics, both the comics and the movies, Hydra is this evil organization that their tagline is, you cut off one head and two more will grow back. So because you defeat one villain and more will just rise up to take its place. And yeah, you really see that in the second Captain America movie, where Hydra is revealed to be far more nefarious than people realized.
Yeah. I just thought we had to go off on a little tangent. Yeah.
Well, I'm always happy for a Captain America tangent.
I figured. So.
I was just going to ask. Prometheus.
Oh, that'll be up.
Okay.
Are we going to go through all of the labors?
I
don't
figured
know.
we
It's
at
on
least
the
mention
outline,
them.
so I was like,
Yeah.
Prometheus is confusing. So I don't know.
Well, he's like labor 8 or 9 or 10 or something.
Yeah, if I remember right, he's like, 11 or 12?
I know. It's towards the end.
Yeah, it's labor 11. So that's the next one that kind of takes the place of the Hydra. Yeah, let's go through all of them real quick. To capture the Serenidian hind, who was sacred to the goddess of Artemis.
Aww, he messed with Artemis.
He captures it. He doesn't kill it.
Yeah.
Okay, good point.
So
I think that's actually the job, because it would be easier to kill it than to capture it.
yeah,
Oh, done.
It's like it's a deer or an
Yeah.
antelope or something like that.
Got it.
so Artemis would have killed him for hunting it. And then she heard about the labors and was like, "Well, if you catch it, takes it down with an arrow to the hoof." It's kind of crazy, but
Very skilled.
Yeah, it took him over a year to do it. So that's a pretty impressive feat, just to not give up after like 2 days.
That's commitment. Okay, what are some of the other labors?
Capture the Erymanthian boar.
We saw that one in the movie.
That's in the montage.
Okay.
Yeah. And he also, during that labor, he meets up with Jason and the Argonauts, which is also referenced somewhat in the movie.
Yeah, he gets a shout out when he's going through Phil's house. He hits his head on the mast of the Argo, which is the ship from which the Argonauts get their name. And that's a really fun story, which if we ever end up doing an Avengers podcast, we'll talk a lot about Jason and the Argonauts, because it's basically...
We better.
It's basically the first... Well, it's an ancient form of the team-up of a bunch of Greek heroes joining forces to go do something else. A lot of famous names from Greek mythology were on that boat. And Hercules was one of them.
Let's save it for another podcast, though, because I could
Oh,
get
yeah.
into this.
But we got to mention it.
Okay.
It all ties in, to our Story Cauldron universe. Yeah? Anybody? All right. Well, the fifth labor is cleaning of the stables. We talked about that one a little bit. The sixth labor, to drive away the Stymphalian birds who were ravaging the countryside. And if I'm butchering these pronunciations, I am so sorry. Please let us know. He had to drive them away, and he accomplished it by taking the rattle given to him by Athena, and it startled the birds who flew away, and then shot them down with the Hydra-tipped arrows.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I knew the Hydra arrows came in somewhere.
Labor number 7, to bring back the Cretan bull from Knossos.
Okay.
The bull belonged to King Minos of Crete. So
Cool.
There's another story with some bulls.
Yeah, isn't that where the story of Theseus comes in?
Yeah, and the birth of the Minotaur and stuff. Yeah. All right. So labor number 8, to bring back, to bring back the mares of Diomedes.
Oh, that one sounds good.
And
That's how it's said.
Diomedes was a king who fed horses human flesh, and nobody could come near them.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Horses with human flesh.
Yeah,
That
he would
sounds
feed
gross.
the horses human flesh. And
Like you do.
So anyway, Hercules fed Diomedes to the horses.
And that's a twist of events.
Poetic
I like
justice. So there's that. There's to bring back the Hippolyte's girdle.
That one is mentioned in the film too.
Is it?
Bill says we gotta go get a girdle.
Oh, yeah. Wait, is it Hippolyta? Is it the queen of the Amazons? Hippolyta?
Yes, that's okay. So
Yeah.
to bring back.
I just remember the girdle.
I don't know what I'm saying. I just read this stuff.
Well, I know that from Wonder Woman. That's
Oh,
Wonder
okay.
Woman's mom.
God, I
is
still have not
Hippolyta.
watched that yet.
Oh my God! If you only watch one,
It's in the Amazon card.
one
It's
DC
happening.
movie. It has to be Wonder Woman. I saw Justice League a couple of days ago, and it just made me want to go watch Wonder Woman again, so I can remember what a good movie is like.
Ouch.
Wonder Woman is fantastic. I mean,
Okay.
seriously,
It's in the Amazon
It's
card.
It's so good that if Batman v Superman and Justice League had to be made in order for Wonder Woman to be made, it would be worth it.
All right.
Wonder Woman is that good. The rest of them, well, we can debate. But anyway, Hippolyta, is the queen of the Amazons.
Hippolyta.
Back
And-
to
Got
the
it.
girdle.
In there too.
Well,
So,
yeah.
I don't know if she has a girdle in Wonder Woman, but I guess Hercules would have stolen it anyway, so who cares?
So, well, anyway, this is kind of a cool story. Speaking of Wonder Woman, because the Amazons originally welcomed Hercules, but Hera was there disguised as one of them. And spread a rumor that Hercules came to the island to kidnap and enslave them. Pretty crazy. And then
what, they turn on him?
Hippolyta's sister actually ransoms her for the belt and then leaves peacefully. So, he accepts the girdle as a legitimate labor.
Well, if it works out with you not having to fight a horde of Amazons, it works out in your favor.
Yeah, even if you are Hercules,
Yeah.
still.
I would put my money on them.
And that was number 8?
That was number 9.
Number 9.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm going to butcher some of these other ones as well. These names.
Hit me.
To bring back the cattle of, is it Gerion or Garion?
I would guess Garion.
Garion?
in Greek.
Anyway, Hercules had many side adventures on this labor, inadvertently building the pillars of Hercules at Gibraltar and threatening to shoot the sun with his arrows for making him too hot. Yeah, that's a thing. No AC, just threatened to kill the sun.
It reminds me of that scene from 30 Rock where Buzz Aldrin yells at the moon. He's just, moon. And Hercules, the sun. All right, anyway.
Okay, so when he finally reaches Spain to get these cattle, he had a bunch of problems, including chasing down a bull, because the herd had to be complete in order for the labor to count. And Hera sent gadflies to sting the beasts and scattered them, so Hercules had to round them up again. It was just basically Benny Hill music and herding cats. Only the cats are cattle.
gigantic ones.
Yeah, it was pretty humorous, I guess. Like, son. Yeah, just
And
a lot of it.
That's number 10?
That was number 10. And now we get to the Prometheus one. So to bring back the golden apples of Hesperides.
And we talked about Prometheus some on the Van Helsing podcast.
Yeah.
Because we
Frankenstein,
talked about Frankenstein.
the modern day Prometheus.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So in Greek mythology, Prometheus, he had been punished by Zeus for helping out humanity. And he had been chained to this rock and left to be tortured every day by this eagle that was coming to eat his organs. Until
Yeah, that sucks.
Hercules ends up coming along and rescuing him. Like, that's how Prometheus gets out of it, is that that's not actually the labor, though. That's just something that Hercules does
In order to achieve the labor, yeah.
because he needs to figure out how to get the apples.
Yeah.
And so he goes and asks for Prometheus's help, and Prometheus
Basically tells him that these apples are by the end of the earth and guarded by a dragon that can't be conquered. And this is also the labor where we start to meet the Titans. Because Prometheus is a Titan himself, and
considerably different from the Titans in Disney's
exactly,
movie.
yes. You don't exactly think of the Titans to be in human form in the Disney Hercules. They're like what, a tornado and a lava monster.
Very much
and,
elements.
yeah.
Yeah, you've got these 4 elements of
Freeze him.
Blow him away.
And that actually, we can point to Greece as being kind of the source of that framework too. The idea that there are these 4 basic elements to the universe: fire, air, water, and earth. In Greece, there was a pre-Socratic philosopher named Empedocles that basically said, this is what everything is made up of. Pre-Socratic means before Socrates, so before Plato. There are a bunch of philosophers that we just don't have a lot of records of. We have little bits and quotes from them in other places. And Empedocles is one of those guys. He's a really fascinating system, it seems like, where he says everything is one of these 4 things, or they combine in different ways, and the universe goes in these cycles between love and strife. And he's very poetic, but it looks like the Disney movie has taken those 4 elements and turned them into these gigantic mountainous monsters and just called them Titans. But the Titans in actual Greek myth, really, they were more like they were a tribe of gods, basically.
Yeah.
They would have looked basically the same as Zeus and Hera and everybody else.
Yeah, in fact, Zeus is a son of a Titan, Kronos.
Yeah, him.
So I mean, they're all kind of intertwined, and they're all gods in one form or another. So we have Prometheus, who actually in Greek mythology is credited with building humans, creating them out of clay and breathing life into them. So Hercules goes out, and on his way to find these golden apples, he meets Prometheus, who is set free after his torments and stuff like that. And he's told that, hey, end of the world, there's this dragon, he can't be conquered, you should go get my brother Atlas to help you. And
that's right.
Yeah.
I remember this now.
Atlas is also a Titan. And if you're not familiar with Atlas, he was the guy that you always see holding up the earth on his back. Or
He shrugged once.
he did shrug. Oh.
Yeah, the Ayn Randians out there just clapped. They're the only ones.
Probably.
They don't deserve it.
I hate myself so much right now for making that joke.
Oh, boy.
Just for that reason.
That's right.
Thanks, Ein.
But yeah, so that was the one where he goes and he basically gives Atlas a break, right?
Yeah, he ends up carrying the weight of the world literally on his shoulders.
Oh, poor guy.
And Atlas is like, okay, cool, I'm going to go get these apples for you. Anyway, yeah, then there was this thing where Atlas comes back with these apples. He's like, yeah, I don't think I really want to trade you back.
Because that was his punishment. The Titans had been punished by, not Zeus. That was something that the movie changed too, because they needed more conflict. The Zeus did not defeat the Titans. Zeus's grandfather, Uranus, had imprisoned them where they were imprisoned, which was not under the ocean, but that's But yeah, Atlas, this was his punishment, that he had to hold up the heavens from crashing down onto the earth. And so, yeah, when Hercules gives him this break...
Yeah, Atlas is like, see ya, sucker. The funny thing is, though, Hercules graciously accepts. He's like, yeah, I'll totally keep holding this up for you. But, hey, just for a second, can you hold this so I can readjust my cloak? I'm going to be here a long time. I want to make sure that I'm, covered up and stuff. And Atlas takes back the weight. And then Hercules himself is like, stupid. Later.
So that's 11.
That's 11.
One more.
And the last labor of Hercules to bring back Cerberus, the guard dog of the underworld.
Oh.
Which happens in the movie.
Yeah,
He doesn't bring him back.
Well,
but there is three-headed dog.
He rides him.
He rides him.
Remember, he busts down the gates.
Yeah. Which I think was pretty funny.
It was a pretty epic moment.
So, yeah, anyway, that was the last labor. He had to... Basically, this last labor was supposed to be something that was absolutely impossible for Hercules to do. Or for him to be able to bring back Cerberus, he had to go into the underworld, take him, get past Hades, which is not really an easy task. No. He was not exactly the nicest guy in Greek mythology. Just ask, Demeter.
I was going to say Orpheus.
And, well, yeah.
That was
and
his
Persephone,
own fault.
True.
Persephone's the one who really gets stuck with him. But that's,
Demeter and Persephone, which we've talked about before.
Well, and that's something that I do want to think. I want to make the point here that they really did a disservice. No, that's not the right way to put it. It's not a disservice, but they did change Hades even more so, because you're right. He's not necessarily a nice guy, but he's. Of the different gods, none of the gods are nice guys in Greek mythology. No. They're all horrible, and they're all petty and fighting with each other and sleeping around, and they're all just bad people, ethically speaking. So
I feel at least Hades has somewhat of a code of honor.
Honestly, yeah. I would say among all of them, Hades is arguably the best, because the only thing he's done is kidnap his wife once, which, again, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that in comparison... If you're listing how many times he's committed sexual assault, it's less than the others. Yeah. Not saying he's okay, but by comparison,
he's just not as bad.
And at least he lets his wife go visit.
Well, yeah,
for a few months out of the year.
And this whole idea that he is this evil villain who hates being king of the underworld, that's all Disney. The whole idea that Hades wants to take over Zeus's kingdom and replace Zeus because he's disgruntled that he's been kicked down underground there's nothing like that in Greek mythology. He's pretty content. He's happy to stay out of the petty affairs of a lot of the other gods, and really, other than the fact that he kidnapped her, he's actually faithful to his wife. He doesn't sleep around like Zeus does, Poseidon does. I mean, there's lots of problems that the other guys cause, and Hades is just underground kind of doing his thing. There's a book series I love. It's a fantastic book series. If you like fantasy stories, you'll really enjoy it. It's called The Dresden Files by a guy named Jim Butcher. And it's about this wizard who's a private investigator in Chicago, and but it gets a lot more complicated than that. He's written, I think he's on book 16 now. There's quite a few. But in one of the recent books, he actually meets Hades, and he has this fantastic conversation with Hades. And Hades actually comments on how he often gets a bad rap in pop culture, but it's this real regal official, they're in this nice, very very ornate study, filled with many leather-bound books and things like that.
Smells of rich mahogany.
Yes, exactly. So that's a great picture of Hades. And don't get me wrong, I think James Woods is hilarious, and as far as a Disney villain goes, he's perfect. But it's very different than the Greek picture.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to unpack the final labor real quick, because this is where we're introduced to the Eleusinian mysteries.
Oh, yeah.
And Deianira. And just a lot of cool stuff that we should probably at least mention.
We talked about this at some point. When did we talk? I forget which episode.
I can't remember when, but
maybe it was the Matrix episode? I remember we talked about
maybe
the Eleusinian mysteries at some point. But yeah, where's this going?
All right, so we know that Hercules has to go to Eurystheus, and he's the one that's actually giving him all these labors to atone for his sins. Anyway, when he's given this task to bring back Cerberus, he goes to the sacred city of Eleusis. That's right, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Are you just saying pronunciation?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
right.
he could be initiated in the Eleusinian mysteries.
Oh, so that he could actually go down into the
so
underworld.
he could be, so he could enter the underworld, because you couldn't enter the underworld without being initiated.
Okay.
Wasn't sure how that was going to happen, but so he goes to Hades. He has further adventures down there. He frees his cousin Theseus, which is also a big name.
Well, yeah, cousin again, because Zeus slept around a lot.
Yeah, promiscuous. So anyway, he freed Theseus from the chair of forgetfulness, where he had been bound. He also spoke with the hero Meleager. Yeah. He also spoke with the hero Meleager, with whom he had journeyed with the Argonauts, who told him that when he returned to Earth, he should marry Meleager's sister, Deianira. And Hercules was allowed by Hades to take Cerberus, provided that he didn't hurt the dog at all, or we could call it a dog, right?
Sure.
All right, cool.
And see, again, Hades, nice guy.
Yeah, he's all like,
recognizes
just don't hurt the animals.
No reason not to let him borrow the dog.
Get a little Sarah McLachlan in the background as he's like, but he does wrestle Cerberus into submission, brings him back, and Eurystheus, who was so terrified of Cerberus, he told that Hercules, like, "Yep, you're done. Just take the dog back to Hades where he found him." That's pretty much how it goes. And then he ends up meeting his wife. He frees his cousin. All these different things happen during this 12th labor. So I feel like that was pretty important to mention, because that's like a who's who of Greek mythology.
And this is his second wife, right?
Yeah.
'Cause his first wife was Megara.
Yes.
And he killed her.
Womp womp.
And I don't know, I guess it's kind of poetic, because his second wife ends up killing him. Well, kind of. Not intentionally, but it is kind of her fault.
It's a thing. It happens.
Because, in Disney's movie, he meets Megara when there is the quote-unquote river guardian, the centaur that she's trying to talk to. Nissos is a character from Hercules' story in the original myths. And I think he is a centaur, too, actually.
Yes, he is.
And he kidnaps Deianira, and when Hercules is trying to get her back, he kills Nissos. And he doesn't just punch him into the sky; he actually kills him with Hydra arrows, if I remember right.
Yep.
And in his dying breath, the centaur Nissos tells Deianira that his blood. Well, it comes a few different ways. It's either his blood or his shirt or his blood that she puts onto his shirt, basically that my blood will make him love you forever. And so later on, when Deianira starts to think that maybe Hercules is like starting to get interested in other women, she gives her husband a robe dipped in Nissos' blood, or a shirt dipped in Nissos' blood, or something like that. And when Hercules puts it on, he realizes, and she realizes, that it was a trick, that Nissos was obviously not telling the truth, but that his blood was poisonous. And he can't take the shirt off. The robe just keeps burning him, and he's suffering, and he's in so much pain that he actually chooses to die. Like, this is how he ends up dying, is because he builds his own funeral pyre, and he ties himself to it, and then he begs for somebody to come light the fire, so that he can die this kind of honorable hero's death. And nobody will do it. Nobody wants to be the guy who killed Hercules, even though Hercules is literally begging through his like pain-racked tears. And the guy who actually steps up to the plate to do it is a guy with a familiar name, Philoctetes.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah, who's not a satyr in Greek myth. He's just a guy. He's just a warrior who shows up in a few different stories, actually. Sophocles wrote a play about him. He's mentioned in the Iliad, and he's a guy who... So he fought in the Trojan War, and he's the guy who lights Hercules' funeral pyre. And so because of that, Hercules lets Philoctetes keep his Hydra arrows and his bow. Mm-hmm. I don't know how he didn't run out of arrows. That's something that's kind of strange to me. But that's what ends up happening with this great weapon.
Maybe
Hercules
he just reused them.
I guess that's true.
I guess that could work.
I guess,
Because when you get good arrows, like, you don't just leave them.
That's true.
You'll go back and get them.
I was just thinking that, Hercules and Hawkeye have something in common, like a never-ending TARDIS quiver.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. So Hercules is like Hawkeye plus the Hulk.
Oh. Let that sink in, everybody.
I'm gonna meditate on that one.
We've gone through all the labors. We've talked about his second wife.
We talked about his death.
Which, if you really think about it, when Hercules in the movie decides to become mortal to marry Megara, he gives away his god powers and stuff like that, which is pretty similar to him putting on the shirt that saps him of his energy and ends up, leading to his death.
With one huge difference, which he knew that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's, okay, so this is a movie that I've actually played in my classes before. This every trimester, because our high school operates on trimesters here, not semesters.
Well, for some of us,
it's complicated. But, so every class, I always try to find a movie that goes along with whatever the topic is for that class, and so this trimester we're going to be we've been talking all about kings and the kingdom of Israel in the Old Testament, and so I'm thinking we're probably going to watch The Princess Bride.
Awesome.
Because that's a great movie and it talks a lot about
it
some
really
of the things
is.
that go along.
Yeah.
But when we went through the Gospels, like the stories, the biographies of Jesus in the Bible, we watched Hercules. Because I would argue that Hercules in Disney's movie looks a lot more like Jesus than he looks like Hercules from Greek mythology. And I don't mean looks like in a physical sense. Obviously, that's not the case. But in terms of his character, in terms of his story arc as well. I mean, if I put it this way, like, who am I describing? The man God sacrifices his life to save others and returns to heaven to be with his Father.
That sounds like the Bible.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, it's Hercules.
That's the Disney Hercules.
When he consciously chooses to dive into the river Styx to save Megara, he is sacrificing himself. And there's plenty of movies that do this. Hercules is not alone in this. The whole messianic archetype of somebody who sacrifices himself to save others. I mean, we already talked about the Avengers. We could point to Iron Man.
We've talked about Neo in past episodes.
That's right. Yeah, he's another one. I'm sure we'll talk about more as we keep going through. But yeah, I think that's something that this movie is almost consciously traveling along too. It's not just Greek myth, but it's also this Judeo-Christian kind of story where Hades looks a lot more like the devil, like kind of this pop culture view of the biblical Satan. This guy who lives underground and he's mean and he's fighting against the gods up in heaven. And even like Pain and Panic, they look a lot more like the little demons that fly around. Don't they even have pitchforks at one point?
They
certainly
so.
have little horns.
They have little horns, they have little tails, and they have little wings.
Yeah, so it looks a lot more like some of these vaguely Christian ideas of Satan as a villain, and of Hercules as basically Jesus. So,
all right. Well, you had mentioned it a little while ago, but superheroes. We talked about the Hulk. We've talked about Hawkeye. Mm-hmm. Anybody else that you could think of?
Well, talking about Jesus too, we did this last week in the Batman v Superman episode, but yeah, Superman I think is going to be also somebody that you get, and that's intentional. I mean, the directors said that they wanted to make with Hercules, it was their chance to make a superhero movie for Disney.
Oh, okay.
And he is. I mean, again, naive farm boy who's really strong, Is that Superman or is that Hercules? I mean, he's such a nice guy in this Disney movie. He's just kind of this happy-go-lucky kid who is out of his element, and he's this
accidentally breaking things.
Yeah, this small-town kid in a big city who doesn't know what's going on. In the actual Greek myths, he's a lot more violent. He's a lot more promiscuous. He's a lot more what's the word? Not world weary, but kind of more cosmopolitan. He's not as surprised by the world. He's not as nice. And this, Disney's Hercules is really nice in the way that you kind of picture Superman being too. There's like this Boy Scout. He's a big, strong Boy Scout.
The idea of a perfect gentleman.
Wonder Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Tie it all back in. All right, so there's one thing that we haven't really talked about. You mentioned that the Titans aren't chained up under the ocean, but they are actually kind of chained up in darkness, right? And the original hell embodiment, like Tartarus.
So yeah, the idea of like heaven and hell that a lot of Westerners talk about, or that nominal Christians talk about, or the Christians talk about, is a little bit different than the way Greeks would have talked about the underworld. Like everybody went to the underworld, whether you were a good person or a bad person. There was a
good part of the underworld and a bad part of the underworld.
Yeah, everybody went down to Hades.
The Elysian Fields.
And the worst place to go was Tartarus. And that's where Uranus had entrapped the Titans in the lowest, deepest, darkest pits of hell. And there is actually one reference to it in the Bible in 2 Peter 2. There's one mention of Tartarus as this place where these things are chained up, these evil things are chained up in darkness to be held for judgment. But again, it's a little different than the Disney movie, and understandably so, right? Like they don't want it to be this dark, evil, scary thing. They're just under the ocean.
Under some lightning bolts.
Under some lightning bolts, yeah.
No big deal. That, and then we also are introduced to the Fates.
Love them.
Yeah, I wanted to save these guys towards the end because when I see these Fates, I immediately think of Shakespeare. I think of like just all sharing the eye and the lifelines and
indoor plumbing. It's gonna be big.
There's so many things that are just so fun to talk about with these Fates.
I love that in the Disney movie they personify them. One is past, one is present, and one is future. Like that's the only place I think I've ever seen that they're past, present, and future. But I love the idea of these three goddesses that are what's the word? They take care of human destinies, like as their main focus.
Yeah. And in Disney's movie, they joined the idea of the Fates together with a different triplet in Greek mythology. You've got the Fates on one hand, and then you've got the Graea on another. And the whole idea that they are these old women who share an eye, in Greek myths, that's not the Fates. That's the Graea.
That's the Graea, yeah.
Yeah, the Graea are, you meet them in the stories of Perseus, who steals their eye to get them to tell him stuff about how to defeat Medusa, who actually makes I think Medusa is in that Zero to Hero montage also.
Yeah, she's just really green.
Yeah, with snakes. I think the snakes for her hair.
I think they were snakes.
Maybe not.
I don't know.
But regardless, like
she's on top of the stack when he punches all three at once.
Yeah, the monster that turns people to stone if you look at them, that's Perseus. Who different?
Oh, we should Clash of the Titans.
We should do Clash of the Titans. Oh, that's a great movie. Oh, I haven't seen that movie in
talking the original, right?
Oh, of course, yeah, with Archimedes the owl.
I'm surprised you didn't watch it in high school.
About par for the course.
We were supposed to watch it in 7th grade, but I was out of class that day for orchestra.
It is such fun. But anyway, it tells a story kind of Perseus and the Medusa and the Kraken. But the Graea and the Fates in Disney's Hercules, yeah, they just kind of get smushed together.
Interesting.
So, I mean, I think the Fates are just kind of this they're just goddesses. They're just kind of beautiful goddesses.
These are all but beautiful.
Yeah, no.
Well, Hades flirts with them enough so that they tell him what he wants. So
Yeah, but like that's the car salesman.
yeah.
So, so how much? How are we doing on time?
Actually, we're just about done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as far as where this is going to go, where Hercules is
Also,
going to go.
just I would like to throw in there actually is 9 muses. There's not 5.
Oh,
but
that's
dang,
true.
those muses though.
Do you know why they went with 5?
Indeed.
Why?
Because they were originally hoping to get the Spice Girls to voice all 5.
Oh my god.
But there was a scheduling conflict, and so they couldn't do it.
That is so 1997.
And right? And that would have been, I don't know. I mean, that would have been amazing in its own way.
Yeah.
I love the way that the muses come off in this movie, though. And they
Same.
do have the best song with
It's
Meg.
true.
That is such a fun song.
Also, speaking of Meg, such a complex character for, you know, like
Yeah, we haven't talked about her hardly at all.
I know.
Just that Hercules kind of kills her in the mythology.
Yeah,
But in the movie,
Yeah.
love her.
I
Sarcastic.
think, especially as a guy who has daughters, I love her. I would love for my daughters to grow up to be like her. You know,
Just don't sell your soul.
Well, yeah, except for that part of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, how she doesn't. She's not taken in. She doesn't care. She's this very self-aware, self-controlled woman. Yeah,
Love it.
fantastic.
And Susan Egan. Can't get over that.
Apparently, she had auditioned for Disney roles in like 6 different movies, and she just never got them until this one.
And then she got this one. She was the original Belle in Beauty and the Beast on Broadway.
Well, and speaking of Broadway, there is not a Hercules show on Broadway, but just a few months ago, Alan Menken, who
Yes, Alan Menken. The
Alan Menken, yeah, he made some reference to the fact that he's working on a Hercules adaptation.
I know.
Has
My
Disney
Instagram
confirmed
blew
that?
up.
Because at the time Disney said no, this isn't happening.
I'm gonna look that up right now. Actually,
I
am very.
I would love
interested,
it.
Very invested.
Honestly.
Alan Menken. I will go the distance.
Do we need a hashtag Garrett for Hercules?
No, I feel like that might get a little too messy. But just like tweet Alan Menken.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
I'm gonna tweet him.
They have had so many great Broadway adaptations of Disney plays and Disney or of Disney movies with Alan Menken's involvement.
Yeah.
So
he's such a genius.
And it would play so well on the stage, wouldn't it? I mean,
I think it would. I think it would be amazing.
Ben Platt needs a new role, so let's get him in for Hercules. He'll bulk up.
True. He goes ham.
Right.
He goes ham.
I could see it.
Ooh, sorry. I'm looking this up. Will Disney's Hercules go the distance on Broadway?
While you're doing
so many
that,
good titles.
Bobby, you tell me this: would in a showdown between Hercules and John McClane?
Hercules.
No, really?
Oh, it's a Hercules, man.
Well, I was thinking this would be one I'd go with McClane.
Really?
Well, I mean, he's got guns.
He's got
he's got bullets.
He's got
guns
bullets.
with bullets, not guns with muscles.
Okay, but is this Disney Hercules or real Hercules? Well, like real mythology.
Either one. I'd still put my money on McClane. Well, unless
Greco-Roman wrestling.
okay, yeah. As soon as Hercules gets him in the bear hug, obviously it's all over.
It's over.
There's no contest.
If he takes out Cerberus, John McClane doesn't have a chance.
But that was through sweet talking Hades. That wasn't through a fight.
Well, he had to wrestle Cerberus.
Oh yeah, that's true. He did.
Yeah, so I mean,
that was
like,
his thing, wasn't it?
Grr. I just see John McClane as a big 3-headed dog.
Yeah, let's get some fan art of that, please.
Yeah.
Let's get Bruce Willis as Cerberus.
All right, so
with Ben Platt on his back.
Okay, I just
this
looked
is
it
taking
up.
a weird
This
turn.
is getting
There
weird.
has not been any statements made since July when Disney said, no, it is great, but we're not working on it. And Alan Menken was like, ooh, it's going to surprise you.
Yeah, maybe Disney just doesn't want to distract from like the Frozen adaptation that they're working on.
Oh, it's true. It's true.
You know, they
Which
do
I
have
hear
other.
is very good, by the way.
It's got to be better than the movie.
Oh, shade.
Ooh, I'm very interested, though. I saw a picture of the Sven that they're using.
Oh, that's right.
Stagecraft at its finest.
Nice.
I imagine that within the next month we'll probably do a Frozen episode, so you'll be able to go.
For those of you who are
for
waiting,
Sven all over the place.
Yeah.
So it seems like a good thing to do around Christmas time.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a Christmas movie.
But it's wintry.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've got to ask you guys, who would you recommend this movie to? Okay, so Garrett, everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah.
I would go back in time and recommend it to myself at 9 years old and slap myself upside the head and say, "Hey, stupid, you're not cool for this. You're not too cool for this. This is a good movie. Go watch this."
Yeah, you'll understand it when you're older.
And and I think it does have a lot of little jokes for the adults, little thing, not adult jokes, but jokes that only adults are going to get. Like half of the stuff that James Woods says is. Yeah, it's going to go over. He's a lot like Robin Williams in Aladdin.
Yes,
with making all these jokes for the moms and dads.
In fact, when you said they originally wanted Jack Nicholson, I immediately thought of Genie as Jack Nicholson.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So
throwing this out there, all the Oedipus comments and all of the Oedipus references, 10 out of 10.
You're a big fan of Oedipus?
I wouldn't say that, but I just. Comments
his mom
make,
was a big fan of Oedipus. So.
That's
gross.
But just like the whole, that Oedipus thing. Ooh, I thought I had problems.
Yeah.
Just so many good references.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that it's going to go over a lot of kids. Hopefully.
Let's hope. Yeah. All right. Well, anything that you guys would change?
I mean, given the fact that the movie is made for the audience that it's made for. It's not necessarily just a kids movie, but it is geared towards kids. So I honestly don't know if there is anything you could change for this. I think Meg gets a lot of focus, which is great.
Yeah.
It's more unusual for kind of Disney movies at the time, where they have a good balance for the guy and the girl. I really can't think of anything. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a perfect movie, but it's for what it was trying to do. I think it was pretty good.
All right, Gare?
I can't really think of anything. I just really love the muses.
Ooh, yeah. Fair.
So if they could have, but they were incorporated a lot. Mm-hmm. So
have a follow-up movie with just the muses.
I wouldn't say that.
They did have that TV show. Did you ever see the show?
I never saw that.
It was. I don't know. It's all right.
All right. Well, yeah, I agree with both of you guys. It's good for everybody, and it really is really good for
it's fun.
What it is.
It's short. It's like 90 minutes long, so it's not even if you don't like it, you've not wasted a long time.
Yeah,
I mean, it's fun. It's a nice little bite-sized Disney movie. Again, and I think it deserves its spot in that Renaissance titles too. That it's among some of the best movies that Disney's made.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So, that brings us to the very end of the hour. Thanks for joining us today on the Story Cauldron. The music for this episode is from the band Hook Sounds.
And you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Just search for The Story Cauldron.
And if you're interested, go check out thestorycauldron.com if you want to know more about us or what we're doing. I think we're working on a reading list.
Oh, that's up, actually.
Is it?
Yeah, it's available. We should, if I have it, I'll put it up again. We called it the cookbook because I'm very clever. All of the ingredients are up there, and you can. It's actually a way that you can help support the Story Cauldron too. If you click through any of those links to Amazon and make any purchases on Amazon, then it actually will help us pay for some of our hosting fees.
Nice. And don't forget to rate us on iTunes and leave us a review.
Yeah, it helps other people find the podcast and lets us know that you enjoy what we're doing.
Which. Let us know too if there are movies that you would like us to review in future episodes. The reason we went with this one today is actually because it was requested by our first reviewer, who he is my brother, so I guess he's not the inside track, but the track's available.
Thank you, Anthony's brother. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's Daniel.
And then tweet at us what you want to hear. I mean, that's what it's there for.
Let us know, because obviously there are plenty of movies that we could go and talk about, but what do you want to hear us talk about?
Exactly, and let us know before next time.
And until then.
Bye.
Bye.